All right, mate, how you doing? So I just jumped off a coaching call with a client now, and there's a tool that I suggested that he use for his specific problem, and it made me realize that this tool is actually so applicable to so many issues that men face that I wanted to share this with you on a video because honestly, like, you might be skeptical when I say that this tool I'm going to share with you, this process I'm going to share with you, can help you with everything. Because what tool can really help you with everything? But I wouldn't be saying that if I didn't fundamentally believe it. But let's talk about a couple of problems that this can help you with. If you procrastinate, if you know what to do but you never do it, if you have an anxiety that holds you back, like a social anxiety that holds you back from being the man that you want to be, if you have a bad habit that keeps coming up, an impulse, a toxic behavior, a habit that keeps holding you back, you don't know why that happens. Basically, if there's something that's happening in your life that's on the surface, you know the outcome of it, you know this kind of like toxic behavioral pattern, and you don't know why it's happening, then this process I'm going to take you through will reveal all of it to you. I'm going to talk you through it using my journal in this video, but I'm also going to leave a downloadable version at the end of this video that you can use. Let's break this whole process down. The technique I'm telling you today is called the pattern awareness exercise. Something you need to understand is in your life right now is by large a result of the habits and patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Okay, it's the interrelationship between the three things. Your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors, the ones that you've repeated over a long enough time frame, have formed the core of your beliefs and core of your identity, which has given you the life that you currently have. Okay, so if you want to change on a deep level, it's not good enough to just change your behaviors and just think, I should just do this different behavior. Because how many times have you done that, mate? Where you just think, you listen to David Goggins or you listen to some other people and you think, you should just meditate, bro. You should just hit the gym, bro. Well, if it was as simple as that, why haven't you done it already? Because behavior on its own is only one part of the whole deal. If you don't look at the thoughts that are happening, that trigger that certain behavior, if you don't look at the emotions that drive the behavior and drive the thoughts as well, if you don't look at all of it, if you just look at your actions, then eventually the same thoughts and the same feelings that have been creating your life and your behaviors for your whole life, they remain unchanged. So the behavior will only last a certain amount of time before the same thoughts and emotions come back up and snap the behavior back to your habit that you've always been, your habitual behavior that you've always been doing. Hope that makes sense. So what is the pattern awareness exercise? I'm going to take you through it. I'm hopefully going to give you some examples. So the pattern awareness exercise is something that you do when you, say, have an emotional trigger, or you notice that you've had a toxic behavior come up and you don't exactly know why, or some anxiety in a social situation or whatever. So let's use an example, because that's going to be good for this purpose. Let's use an example of, I don't know, watching pornography, right? Well, the first step of the pattern awareness exercise, for example, is what we call the trigger. Okay? So what we do here, I'm just going to write this down, a big T. Hopefully you can see that. T, trigger. So a trigger is basically you noticing something in the environment or some situation that you found yourself in that creates a kind of bunch of negative thoughts and a bunch of negative emotions and whatnot. So the trigger in this example might be, I am alone. I've written that down. This is terrible, but you get my point, right? So the trigger is you find yourself alone, and let's say that you're bored. I'm alone and bored. Right, so that's the trigger. Now what we need to do is identify what thoughts come up, what the story is. We might also call this your automatic negative thoughts, but in this case we'll just put another T. So T for trigger, T for thoughts. What you need to do, let's say you find yourself watching porn all the time and you don't know why, right? You just have this trigger, this constant like habitual behavior. Then what you need to do is, when you're running this pattern exercise, is become aware of what thoughts are going off, okay? So in a lot of my clients who've worked with me, when they're trying to overcome porn addiction or whatever, their thoughts might be, I'm a loser, right? I'm a loser, I'm pathetic, right? Or I'm unattractive, right? So basically, low self-worth, attractive. Bah, bah, bah. So right there we've got trigger, being alone and undistracted, being alone and bored, right? The thoughts are, I'm a loser, I'm pathetic, I'm unattractive, okay? So those are the 2 steps, trigger, automatic thoughts. What's the next step? The next step is emotions. So what emotion do those thoughts, I'm a loser, I'm pathetic, I'm unattractive, what emotions does that create? In that case, in the case of this hypothetical client, he would feel shame, right? He would feel shame. He would also feel fear, right? He feels ashamed of who he is because I'm a loser, I'm pathetic, I'm unattractive. He's ashamed of himself because those thoughts obviously create the shame. And he's afraid. Why? Because maybe another thought is, if we dive into the automatic thoughts coming up, what if I never find a partner? What if I'll always be alone? That's a common one. Be alone. Maybe you can relate to these thoughts. These thoughts, I'm not just pulling them out my ass. These thoughts are thoughts that clients commonly have with this problem, okay? I'm a loser, I'm pathetic, I'm unattractive, what if I'll always be alone? That's what creates the fear, okay? So let's take stock of this. Trigger, I'm alone, I'm bored. Thoughts, loser, pathetic, unattractive, what if I'll always be alone? What if, right? That creates the emotion of shame and fear, right? See how we're getting a picture as to the whole situation, not just the action. So let's have a look now at the action. So again, look at my terrible drawings. Trigger, thoughts, emotions, action. What's the action that's taken when you feel the shame and the fear? Well, in that case, right, what does he do? What does this hypothetical person do? He watches porn, right? He finds himself watching shitloads of porn constantly, right? Or maybe in some of you guys, this is when you start binging YouTube videos to try and escape the feeling or whatever. So that's it. That's the action. But what do we do now? Okay, so we're aware of the action. Now what? Well, what we now need to do, okay, we now have down here is C, which is basically step 5, which stands for consequence. What are the consequences of watching porn? And what we want to do is look at the short-term consequences and the long-term consequences. So the short-term consequences of watching porn, for example, is that he feels better, right? He wouldn't do it if it didn't produce a result, right? He wouldn't do it if he didn't feel better from it. So short term, feels good. Okay, that's why he does it. But what about the long term? Okay, here's where we start getting into the weeds a little bit, right? The long term, what are the long term effects of doing, if you just rinsed and repeated this cycle for as long as you lived, what would happen? Long term, he would continue to feel lonely, maybe in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes after, he feels ashamed of himself, right? So thinking in the short term you feel good, but then what happens? After a while he just thinks, I've just jerked off once again to porn, this is not the kind of man I want to be, right? And this might trigger a whole other subset of different thoughts and negative emotions, right? That's the downward spiral a bit. So long term, he also stunts his, for example, stunts his ability to resist short-term gratification, okay? He ruins his discipline. He perhaps cripples in some way his social skills. He cripples his ability to regulate his own emotions and master himself. He basically is in the long term, consequences, is slowly but surely becoming the kind of man he does not want to be, okay? So those are the short-term consequences, feel good. Long-term consequences basically becomes all of the things he does not want to be in his life, all right? So now, what we've completely done is built a solid awareness around a behaviour that is undesirable, okay? Now, the thing is, you can apply this to literally anything. You can apply this to, as I said earlier, social anxiety, a habit you want to break, okay? You can apply this to a random emotional trigger, like seeking approval from women, being super needy, right? If a woman doesn't text you back after an hour, you find yourself messaging shitloads, run this fucking exercise on it. You'll understand exactly what thoughts, feelings, what emotions are going on. But we're not done. Those are the 5 steps, but we've also got a couple of things to do. Now here's where the changing of the pattern comes in. Here's where the pattern interrupt emerges, and we can start picking literally a different pattern, which will change your fucking life, okay? So listen up. We've had consequences now, right? Consequences are done. What about the next step? Right, the next step is the letter R. I really hope this shows up on the video, which is reframe. Okay, what you need to do is basically reframe what? You need to reframe the negative thoughts that came up. Okay, positive reframe. So we might say, like, take a look at this point at all of these thoughts. I'm a loser, I'm pathetic, I'm unattractive, etc. And you can basically find a more balanced perspective, a more balanced way of saying each of them, okay? So I'm a loser. You might want to say, I'm a loser, I'm a work in progress, all right? In progress. I'm pathetic. Well, you can basically find anything for that. It's like, I'm pathetic, okay. That actually works with I'm a work in progress, so that kind of covers both of them. I'm unattractive. You might want to say, some women will find me attractive, not all women, and that's okay, right? So that's a positive reframe. It's not a lie. You're not doing it like The Secret, where I'm the most attractive man in the world, or any other bullshit. You're actually replacing that overly negative thought with a balanced, healthy, and useful thought that's also accurate, okay, that your subconscious mind can't argue with. What if I'll always be alone? And then you can also say, as a reframe, I'll find my person, and even if not, I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy being alone. You know, because sometimes it helps to just take it to the what's the worst thing that can happen. Odds are you won't always be alone. That's just catastrophizing behavior. But yeah. So either way, what you do is you reframe these negative thoughts. And the cool thing here is, mate, as well, you can use ChatGPT to help you reframe your negative thoughts. You can literally input all of your negative thoughts and say, ChatGPT, help me find some positive and balanced reframes to all of these thoughts. And you can rinse and repeat and say these thoughts to yourself a few times and see if it changes your emotional state. Now, that's not it. We've got one final stage, and that is what we call ALT. The handwriting's dreadful, I'm sorry, is alternatives. Okay? Alternative what? Alternative actions. So here's where the action part comes in. Instead of watching porn, what would the best version of you do in that situation instead of watching porn? Okay? If you feel alone and bored, you start getting these negative thoughts come up, right? You start feeling the shame and the fear. What's an alternative action instead of watching porn that you could take that would bring you closer to the man that you're trying to be? All right? Well, in this case, what would it be? If you're seeking some sort of connection, you could call a friend. You could call a friend. If you don't have many friends, you can find, or you could put yourself out there in the world and find a quitting porn accountability group. You can check in with those. You could do a breathing exercise. You could run this pattern awareness exercise. Here's where you get creative, man. I can't tell you exactly what you should do instead, because it's your life. You've got to live it. No one can live it for you. I can't piss for you, right? As the Zen Buddhists like to say. But you need to come up with some alternative actions instead of watching porn, and you need to commit to doing those actions in the future. Click the link in the pinned comment down below. Download that, run this exercise, and I promise you, man, it will give you some self-awareness, and it will basically change the whole trajectory of your life if you can apply the reframes and the alternative behaviors that you set for yourself. Peace. I'll see you in the next